On April 26, 1986, a reactor at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant exploded. The world watched in horror. The images that followed burned into our collective memory. We saw the skeletal remains of Reactor 4, a concrete tomb leaking an invisible poison. We saw abandoned cities, empty schools, playgrounds frozen in time, and we saw pictures of nature gone wrong. Stories and grainy photographs hinted at a terrible transformation. People spoke of animals born with grotesque deformities, creatures twisted by the fallout. These tales painted a monstrous new world, a place where life itself had been warped. The expectation of widespread mutations following the Chernobyl disaster was not just the stuff of science fiction or fantasy. In the public imagination, the word radiation had become synonymous with monstrous transformation, a fear shaped by decades of Cold War anxiety and atomic-age cinema. But this deep-seated dread wasn't entirely baseless. It was rooted in the fundamental principles of nuclear science. High-energy ionizing radiation, the kind released in a nuclear accident, is powerful enough to literally shatter the molecules inside living cells. Its primary target is our genetic blueprint, DNA. This knowledge came from the terrifying history of atomic weapons. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki provided a horrifying, real-world demonstration of radiation's destructive power on a massive scale. From these events and the subsequent era of nuclear testing, the world learned a critical lesson. Radiation could cause genetic mutations. This was rigorously confirmed in controlled laboratory studies. When scientists exposed fruit flies and mice to radiation, they observed that their DNA could be altered, scrambled, and broken. These genetic errors manifested as heritable changes, leading to visible deformities, sterility, and a dramatic increase in cancers across generations. So when Chernobyl exploded, people logically concluded that the vast, contaminated forests and fields would become a real-world laboratory for monsters, a place where nature itself would be grotesquely rewritten. In the immediate aftermath, early reports seemed to confirm those worst fears. The infamous Red Forest appeared almost overnight, as a vast tract of pine trees absorbed lethal doses of radiation and died, their needles turning a ghostly rust color. The chilling question was unavoidable. If the fallout could kill an entire forest so quickly, what unseen damage was it inflicting on the animals living within it? The global media amplified these dramatic images, distilling a complex event into a simple, terrifying equation: radiation equals monsters. But behind the headlines, the slower, more careful work of science was beginning to tell a much different and far more nuanced story. There was no denying the devastation. Initial biological effects were severe, especially in the hot spots closest to the reactor. After the chaos subsided, scientists asked what was really happening to wildlife. Their work contrasted sharply with sensational media. They brought Geiger counters, camera traps, and DNA sequencers, measure radiation, observe animals, test, not tell. Surprise! This was no dead zone. Life was everywhere. Without hunting, traffic, or agriculture, species rebounded. From simple surveys to sophisticated models, patterns emerged. Wolves, wild boar, roe deer, elk, diverse and abundant. Populations were stable, sometimes larger than outside the zone, a sanctuary born from catastrophe. Effects were real, but uneven. Dose and place mattered. Some species showed abnormalities, others did not. To see true impacts, scientists focused on birds and small rodents. Short lifespans, fast reproduction. Effects show up quickly. Small home ranges link health to local radiation. They became our canaries, revealing lingering exposure. In hotspots, swallows showed more abnormalities and lower survival. Beaks deformed, feather damage more common. Their DNA carried more mutations than birds from clean areas. Rodents living in contaminated soil absorb radiation constantly. Some had more cataracts, tumors, weaker immunity, shorter lives. Yet some populations showed adaptation. Improved antioxidant systems may repair damage better. Radiation imposed harsh selection. Survivors passed on resilience, not super mutants. Just populations coping over generations, a grim struggle between damage and survival. While the smallest creatures of the zone showed subtle, often negative micro-impacts from the radiation, the large mammals began to tell an entirely different story. It wasn't just a story of survival, but one of profound, unexpected reclamation. Take the Eurasian wolf. Once hunted to near extinction in this region, they began to drift back into the exclusion zone almost immediately after the human evacuation. The absence of their primary predator, us, created a vacuum. With people gone, their numbers exploded. Today, the wolf population density inside the zone is estimated to be up to 7 times higher than in surrounding unprotected areas, making it one of the densest in Europe. Automated camera traps, deployed deep within the forest, reveal the intimate details of their lives. They show healthy, socially complex packs hunting, raising pups, and living as wolves have for millennia. They have firmly re-established themselves as the apex predators of the zone. As a result, they carry radionuclides in their bodies, absorbed from their prey, primarily deer and boar. Yet when tracked and tested, the wolves show a persistent radioactive burden but also robust health and consistent reproduction. The benefits of an environment free from human persecution appear to far outweigh the physiological costs of radiation. Then, in 1998, another remarkable chapter began. Przewalski's horses, the last truly wild horse species on Earth, were introduced as an ecological experiment. From an initial group of about 30 animals, the population has flourished, growing to well over 200. They have adapted perfectly to this new, empty wilderness. Theirs is a prehistoric presence thriving in the ruins of a futuristic wasteland. The success of the wolves and horses reframes the entire narrative of Chernobyl. It's not a story of mutants and monsters, but one of astonishing resilience at a massive scale. This doesn't erase the human tragedy or the invisible threat that remains, but it powerfully dismantles the myth of a permanent, lifeless monsterland, replacing it with a complex portrait of nature's endurance. To know what happened to animals, understand what radiation does to bodies. It ejects electrons, creating reactive free radicals. They damage cells, especially DNA, our blueprint. Damage scales with dose. High sudden doses cause acute exposure and mass cell death. Many animals in the Red Forest died within weeks. Today, most face chronic exposure, low dose over long periods. It hums along, creating small, persistent injuries. Mutations can raise cancer risk, reduce fertility, and harm offspring. Sickness from radiation is not the same as a mutant gene passed on. Most changes are microscopic, no new limbs or glowing eyes. The scars are cancers, shorter lives, and fewer young. Biology, not monsters. In the exclusion zone, the strongest force shaping life isn't the lingering radiation, it's the profound and sudden absence of people. This abrupt departure created a unique and paradoxical environment, a place where the typical rules of human-dominated landscapes no longer apply. The scale of the exodus was immense. In the days and weeks following the disaster, over 116,000 people were relocated from the most contaminated areas. In the years that followed, that number grew, with 220,000 more eventually moved from surrounding regions. Farms, villages, and entire towns fell silent, their daily rhythms ceasing in an instant. The constant pressures of human activity, agriculture, forestry, traffic, and development stopped almost overnight. With humanity gone, an unprecedented and unintentional nature experiment began on a massive scale. For many species, the benefits of people leaving mattered far more than the risks of the radiation that stayed. Large mammals in particular benefited from the creation of a vast, unbroken habitat free from human interference. Forests began to reclaim abandoned fields, wetlands expanded across low-lying areas. Populations of elk, roe deer, wild boar, and wolves thrived in this new wilderness. Together, the exclusion zones in Ukraine and Belarus now form one of Europe's largest contiguous wild areas. Even incredibly rare species like the elusive Eurasian lynx and the majestic European bison have returned, finding sanctuary here. For an animal, the immediate certainty of a rifle or a highway is far deadlier than the statistical long-term risk of developing cancer from radiation. It's a stark paradox. A landscape poisoned by human technology became a refuge, precisely because humans were forced to leave it behind. The enduring image is monsters and mutants, but fiction obscures facts. Iconic mutant photos were hoaxes or misread common deformities. The initial blast caused some severe defects. It did not create a new mutant lineage. Decades of research agree radiation causes harm. Cataracts in rodents, albinism in swallows, genetic mutations in multiple species. Some populations are smaller in the most contaminated sites, yet overall biodiversity has risen amid human absence. Chernobyl is a mosaic. Dose varies by meter and by lifestyle. A swallow at a radioactive pond suffers more than a wide-ranging wolf. Truth lives in 1,000 interlocking details. More than 3 decades later, Chernobyl still teaches us about radiation, fear, and nature. High doses are catastrophic, human suffering and ecological devastation were real. Be critical of fear and hype. The mutant wasteland myth lingers, science reveals fewer monsters. And more subtle, chronic problems. A world of damage and adaptation, life in a constant, invisible struggle. Evacuation exposed our footprint, removed pressure, and nature rebounds fast. Chernobyl became a benchmark for rewilding. An unintended reserve. The living laboratory continues. The full story isn't written. The truth is more compelling than monsters. In this unlikely place, the persistence of life speaks for itself.